maybe we start here to set context, no? In holistic management and system thinking, we always like to set the context, and we are at a very contextual place. Haidehof has a lot of history. The farm was started in the early 1900s, around 1904 is written on the signs. And back then a rich Hamburgian family wanted to establish a food hub for the Hamburgian West. And back then it was 500 hectares. That's, what is it, 2,000 acres or so? Hectares is fine, we can be metric.
Yes, yeah.
Good. So 500 hectares, in former days quite a big project, and back then the approach was working against nature or submissing nature under human management. So they drained the old swamp and they plowed the shit out of the swampy soils to make it arable, and they cut the forest and started to produce food in a probably not so regenerative manner. And yeah, nature took its toll, and probably 2 world wars and an economic crisis also were involved. So agriculture went downhill, and the whole place got moved into horse riding in the 60s. So from the former 500 hectares, only 20 hectares remain now, and unfortunately still a lot of buildings remain though. We have half a hectare of house and 20 hectares of farmland, which is a very unscaled ratio, you could say. We'll talk a little bit about the economic challenges, but we'll focus on the ecological part and cover the social and economic aspects a little bit in the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's now since 2019 actually that we took over management of Haidehof again and picked up the original idea of food production, and we would like to do that in the framing of a regenerative context that we think is quite adequate for the 21st century. Industrial agriculture in the last 150 years had a big trend of industrialization, and I'll use a little bit the 3 as a guidance for today. It's easy to remember, and we had 3 big topics in industrialization. The first one would be specialization. So agriculture became more and more specialized, away from small diverse family farms to agro industries with very high focus on very specific production systems. They also got mechanized very heavily, so from over 2/3 in the population working in agriculture 150 years ago, we only have 2% of people working nowadays in agriculture, and machinery has taken over a lot of the especially laborers' work, with some advantages and disadvantages. We'll come to that when we look at the garden. And the last trend would be chemification. So we have heavy chemicalized our production systems and moved away from the natural processes that sustain soil fertility, and replaced it by adding synthetic and chemically one fertilizers. This trend of industrialization gave us a lot of yield. We have boosted output in the system, but we have also very high inputs, and it comes at a price. Nowadays we know that a lot of the climate change challenges we are facing these days is connected to the energy use, which is also heavily connected to chemification and mechanization, and a lot of the biodiversity crisis we are facing is connected to land use too. So we have moved with a specialized system into monocultural cropping systems, and there is very little diversity in our agricultural landscapes these days. And next to biodiversity and climate problems, we could probably also mention some social economic aspects concerning rural populations and the demise of them, talking about purposeful work and exploitation of labor, all very closely connected to agriculture. And depending how crazy you want to go about the system, you can zoom in a lot, and you find that many of the socio-economic crises we see in the world are very closely connected to land use and land degeneration. So after 150 years of extractive and highly productive agriculture, we are now facing the challenge of dealing in sustainable boundaries, and we believe sustainable is not enough. So that's why regenerative comes into play. So rebuilding natural resources, rebuilding habitats and biodiversity, rebuilding water cycles, rebuilding nutrient cycles, rebuilding fertile soils, rebuilding productive agroecological landscapes. And that's what we try to do here with 3 farm units or business units. We have ruminants on pasture, we have a bio-intensive, no-dig, mulched market garden. We'll look at the different terms, the 3 of them in the garden. And we have poultry on pasture. We're trying to get our feet on the ground, and it's actually not an easy task to work regeneratively, because obviously a lot of the externalities that I've mentioned before, like biodiversity loss or greenhouse gas emissions, are not adequately priced into our food prices at the moment. And a lot of the positive work that organic farming or regenerative farming does is not yet subsidized or adequately priced in and compensated for at the moment. So it is definitely not easy. But one of the ways we try to make it work here at Haidehof is via direct marketing and internalizing basically value chains. So from the seed in the ground or the egg in the incubator to the euro in the cashier, value generation is on the farm. Of course, that goes with a lot of diversification costs, and you need somebody who sells it, and you need to know a broad range of topics to tackle that. But luckily we are here with a very, very cool team. During the season we are about 9 full-time employees with very different skill sets and very different passions and strength-weakness profiles. So originally I'm trained as an industrial engineer for water systems, and I worked in international development aid for the bigger part of my first professional life, until I realized how closely connected healthy soil and healthy water bodies are. And then, purpose-driven and by the passion to good food, I ventured more and more into the soil realm, and once you've got the soil back, it's difficult to let it loose. So I became pretty fascinated and moved back to Germany after 4 years in East and South Africa, studied natural resource management and started my own little consulting traveling project, and got stuck here at Haidehof after 2 years in a van. And on the other side we have, for example, Alba, who has been in agriculture for about now 16 or 17 years, not classically trained, but trained by doing and visiting a lot of farms. So from seed production to big organic farming to rice harvest to market gardening, where she's been venturing the last couple of years. She has seen a lot and worked in all different climate zones. We have Borg in the core team, so that's the 3 project leaders, you could say, Borg, Alba and me. Borg is a wastewater engineer. Actually, we met in the bachelor studies 15 years ago or so. And then met again, and I had this idea of a little farm, much smaller than this and much less ambitious, but sometimes things change. And now we're here together. And Ricardo, who's taking care of the animals at the moment, he's trained as a remote telecommunications engineer, and we had a data scientists before. So a lot of the people you'll meet when we walk actually don't come originally from agricultural training, which presents the benefit of looking at stuff from a different angle, but also presents the challenge of sometimes lacking the gute fachliche Praxis in German. I'm not quite sure how that would be called in English, like the conventional way of practical training. But let's look at the systems and we'll understand maybe a little bit better what we're talking about. So as promised, 3 is the motto. 3 business units, 3 sales channels. We are entering the first one, which is the farm shop, open twice a week for direct marketing of our own harvest. 90% in the farm shop come from Haidehof. We trade a little bit with potatoes. We have a few milk products from a befriended farmer who's working with dual purpose heritage cattle about 20 kilometers from here. And there's a little bit of olive oil because we think it's a nutritionally absolutely awesome product. and it's difficult to grow the olives here yet. Saturday from 9 to 3 and Tuesdays from 14 to 1900. I would say in a medium range price-wise, comparable to an organic supermarket, and it also meets like our medium approach in the economics of our sales channels. We also have one channel where we aim to feed people. That would be the abo box or the subscriptions. There we actually sell products in winter, in boxes from May to November, delivered or picked up from farm. And most of them actually pay in advance, so that in winter we do have the cash flow to pay our salaries, even though there is no harvest yet. And we have a planning security for a certain amount of vegetables. But it's much cheaper than buying in the shop where you can choose, because we choose the boxes with the seasonal regional availability from our fields. And then there is missing the economic top, and that would be gastronomy. Twice a week we drive to Hamburg and the surrounding and deliver to chefs, most of them quite fascinated about high-class handmade specialty products with a freshness you can't find anywhere else. Very often the stuff is harvested in the morning of the delivery, and we are quite proud that out of the 5 green Michelins, I think 4 are our customers now. And yeah, big plates, small portions, but very tasty, and a pleasure to work with people who appreciate food quality and make something awesome out of your base products, which are already awesome, but still, there is a craft and an art to it.
Does that work in a similar way, like the membership? You know in advance how many people are coming, what you want to grow. Do you have a similar relationship with gastronomy like that?
Not a similar, but a comparable one. So there are, out of our 16 regular customers, we have maybe about 6 or 8 where the collaboration is quite close, and where we also, like from year to year, adopt our crop planning a little bit to the demands. So sometimes there are specialty herbs or something they really can't find anywhere, and then we say, hey, we try to grow that. And it's a big passion of Alba, for example. She's very, very passionate about working with chefs. And if you open these boxes, I mean, back in the day I was driving the deliveries myself in the first years, and when the chef opens and the eyes water, you know, okay, there was something damn right. As you see, we try to preserve a lot. That's also all made on farm, and that's a little bit the idea of a regional seasonal diet, because we will not harvest much in winter. We try to preserve the sun rays of summer and put it in jars so that there is still local produce. Our barn, as you see, this is one of the first buildings we have touched and optimized a little bit to meet our needs. So a leaking roof was replaced, asbestos spoiled walls were replaced, and we got a floor so that the delivery van does not create as much dust as before. And we have the cool house and the washing station and the egg packery. So basically all produce runs through this building. And as this is kind of the hinging point of production and sales and the outside world, we have also established a little communication dialogue center where we explain what we do and why we do that a little bit differently.